The address provided in his file leads me to Upper Starboard, a relatively less rich district in the main deck. It's a half-hour past dawn when I arrive at Mr. Hunter's district on a public zero-G shuttle. Although yes, they're the fastest way to get from one end of the arc to another, zero-G shuttles make me sick. Launching you at super speed from one end to the next in zero-gravity corridors. That type of force creates its own gravity that doesn't ever agree with my stupid stomach. Anyways, after I vomit myself straight, my trek through Upper Starboard begins. The entire district is really just rows and rows of near-identical housing units, leaving the numerical grid layout to provide the only means of navigation. The sprawling suburban nightmare almost makes me sick again, but I press on. I walk for about 20 minutes through the streets, breathing the remarkably stale air, when I finally approach Mr. Hunter's housing unit. Walking up, I noticed his nosy neighbor watching my every step. I wave to her, and she quickly ducks out of sight. Odd. Probably just another miserable Sister Archean looking for drama. Anyways, I continue on and knock on the front door when a housekeeper answers. He welcomes me with a traditional Brother Ark greeting, grasping my right hand with both of his and bowing while bringing my hand to his forehead. The housekeeper brings me inside and tells me to wait in common language as he awakes Mr. Hunter. Left on my own in the hosting room, I survey the decor. Scattered throughout the room are photos of Mr. Hunter, looking around the same age as I remember him. Mr. Hunter's 30-something-year-old face gleamed with joy in every photo. In one, he held his newborn son. In another, he held his toddler son on his shoulders. In another, Mr. Hunter's 30-something-year-old arms wrapped around his newly college-graduated son's shoulders. The housekeeper interrupts my snooping by announcing the arrival of the host. Mr. Hunter walks down the staircase towards the hosting room with a glass of something brown and presumably expensive in his hand. He's no geriatric at all. I swear he looks the same age as he does in the photos.
"Orion Brody!"
Mr. Hunter exclaimed, a little too happy to see me.
"Aren't you a sight for sore eyes?"
He walks into the room and right up to my face. I can still smell the specific stench of stasaline, a cryogenic necessity, on him.
"Well, look at you, all grown up,"
he continues.
"I see your boss sent you my cry for help."
"Yes, I've read up on Ferdinand. My condolences," I remark, not bothering to correct him about Clarissa's occupation. "Do you mind if I ask you a few questions regarding his disappearance?" He gestures to the cushioned seats.
"By all means, anything I can do to help."
I follow his lead and sit down myself. Pulling out a recording device, I make a gesture to ensure Mr. Hunter doesn't mind. He encourages me as I press the record button for Clarissa to transpose later. She really is the best.
Audio of Brody's initial interview with Mr. Hunter.
Mr. Hunter, when did you last see your son?
"Months ago.
And this was at the wedding?
This was before the elopement. Ferdinand was over for dinner one night. He found time in his busy volunteering schedule for me. He didn't even mention Eliza at the time."
And this Eliza, you haven't met her then?
"Correct. And I've never met the girl. Breaks my heart."
Had you been in contact with your son since the elopement? Any radio calls or letters even? What exactly makes you think he's missing?
We used to radio each other every week or so just to check in. No conversation ever lasted longer than 5 minutes, but in one of our radio chats he gave me his current address. A few weeks ago he told me to visit any time. Well, last week I tried to radio him several times, but it was like his radio didn't even exist. After a few days of trying, I eventually went to check out the address he gave me, but it didn't look like anybody lived there. I've tried their housing unit several times since, and each time nobody answers.
Interesting. Mr. Hunter, do you know anything about your son using stasis recreationally? Maybe using your pod a few times growing up?
Orion, I don't appreciate what you're implying here. I use Hassa, yes, but that doesn't make me an inattentive father. I always locked up my pod when Ferdinand was young. If he's gotten into it, it's not because of me. But Ferdinand's a good kid. He wouldn't do anything like that. He cares about this outreach organization and his wife too much for that.
Look, I didn't mean to offend, Mr. Hunter. I'm simply trying to narrow my focus. I'll find your son. I promise.
Thank you, Orion. If there's anything else I can do to help, please let me know. Here's my radio frequency if you need me.
Appreciate it, Mr. Hunter. I'll see myself out, but before I go, would you mind giving me Ferdinand and Eliza's address as well?
Of course, here you are. Thank you again.
I listened to the recorded interview several times on the way to the newlyweds' housing unit, analyzing intently. While I have no reason to believe he's lying to me, Mr. Hunter hasn't earned my trust in the slightest yet. Admittedly, asking him about my father would have provided a chance for him to earn said trust, but I choked on the question. I can't believe I let my nerves ruin that for me. I'll have to follow up on that tomorrow. As I ride another zero-G shuttle, this time vertically, down towards the promenade deck, the interview plays on loop on my radio. Just as my focus turns to avoiding more sickness, the shuttle arrives on the deck that houses Ferdinand and Eliza's estate. The shuttle drops me off several miles from their address, so I signal for a personal rover cab. The cab ride is peaceful enough, although the driver won't stop talking about their husband's gambling obsession, saying he never shows up with any money nor debt after he returns from his gambling trips. They ramble on as we approach the young hunters' housing unit. I ask the driver to stand by while I inspect the unit. If what Mr. Hunter said is true, this will be quick. On approach, the exterior reminds me of the housing unit we grew up in back on Brother Ark. The colors don't match, but the general structure appears identical to the one in my memories. Maybe I just have Brother Ark on my mind. Before I attempt the front door, I sneak around back to look for any windows to look inside before any potential residents realize I'm here. What people do in the sanctity of their own home defines them. Anyways, I found a window with the privacy curtains fully unveiled to show a completely barren hosting room. No furniture, no trash, no signs of life in any capacity. Odd, for sure. Circling back to the front, I first see if the front door is unlocked. Having made the mistake of breaking and entering when I could have just entered, I always check. However, this time, the action bears fruitless. Thinking of my best ways in, I run through all of the usual spots people hide their house keys. Under the rug? Nope. Electrical box in the back? No key. I check 4 more common locations and almost lose faith in myself yet again before autopilot powered by my childhood memories and intuition takes over. When I return to the front of the house, my right hand glosses over the bricks close to the door. Suddenly, my mind catches up to my body when I recall where our family used to keep our house key, behind a loose brick. Surely this vaguely similar house doesn't have the same secrets as my childhood one, though. My intuition proves my logic wrong immediately as I pull out, sure enough, a loose brick. However, my bewilderment meets disappointment immediately when I look inside the secret spot, only to see dust and spiderwebs. I turn my head back to check on the rover cab driver. They wave at me and point to their wrist, indicating I should probably hurry. I wave back before leaning down to pick up the brick. Losing patience myself, I walk around the side once more and toss the brick through the window. The moment I enter the housing unit, it instantly occurs to me why I'm thinking about my childhood home. This unit must have used the same common blueprint as the housing unit I grew up in. Suddenly, I'm transported to the night we left when my family and I did our final walkthrough of our old house. This place is as empty as ours was on that day. The bedroom doesn't have a bed. The library doesn't have any books. I walk all through the unit looking for any signs of anybody ever staying here, to no avail. Maybe the reminiscing distracts me from discovering anything, or maybe truly nobody ever lived here. Then I remember the secret compartment my dad and I would use to give each other messages. Back in our old house on Brother Ark, in the kitchen, a specific drawer hid a false bottom that my dad and I would lift to leave messages to each other. The messages themselves were never anything noteworthy, but I still remember loving the idea when I was young. While I always assumed my dad built it in, I figure it wouldn't hurt to check Ferdinand's identical drawer for a similar false bottom. When I walk into the kitchen, staring at the drawer, my mind goes blank. Sweat beads build up on my forehead. My face feels hot as I pull open the drawer to see it looks completely empty. But that's the idea. I reach in towards the back of the open drawer when my forefinger slips through a small hole. My eyes widen as I curl my finger and lift it up. The kitchen drawer has a false bottom. The front of the house has a loose brick. What is going on here? These can't be design features for this model of housing unit, right? I stop speculating as soon as I see the contents of the secret compartment. A small rectangular device. Not just any device. A device with a feedback display. A computing system with a screen. Something outlawed in the collective long ago. Inspecting the device all around, I accidentally press a button on the side, igniting the screen which practically illuminates the entire house. Without looking at the feedback display, I press the button again, and the screen dies out. I'll have to wade through the contents of this device personally back at the office. Clarissa would love to see the display herself, but I don't want to risk her going blind. Being Brother Archean myself, I should be fine. Satisfied with this fascinating new piece of evidence, I exit the house and start the journey back to my building on main deck, cautious to keep the feedback display device hidden along the way. On the return trip, I think about Mr. Hunter and my dad as I knew them back home. Their heads were always buried in their screens unless they were together. When they were together, they only talked in private and laughed often. But around the family, my dad was always serious and working hard, staring at his feedback displays. He'd occasionally tell me the tale of our superpower. The legends go that during the Odyssey era, a virus broke out on Sister Ark, causing the entire populace to all go blind. While they overcame the challenge through medical advancements, the citizens' new eyes weren't up to par. They retrofitted their entire Ark's technological systems to avoid blue light or any artificial light deemed dangerous, including screens. Or so the tale goes. I'll never forget the day when my dad told me his justification for working so hard, using our superpower as leverage. He said, "Son, the citizens of Brother Ark have the gift of sight. We must use it to help the rest of the collective as much as possible, since they do not share our abilities." This was, of course, when Brother Ark still considered themselves a part of the collective, before my dad lost faith in the unity of the Polsix system, before Mr. Hunter and my dad fell out. long before a random sister Archean shot my dad and left him for dead solely because he was from Brother Ark.